Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this opening panel of the Berlin Humanitarian Congress. My name is Omar Ahmed, and I am the head of the Africa region at Geneva Call, and I'll be having the pleasure and the privilege to chair this fantastic panel to open the session. I'm gonna introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Luise Amtsberg, Federal Government Commissioner for Human Rights Policy and Humanitarian Assistance from the Foreign Office in Germany. We have with us Emmanuel Lampaert, Country Representative of Doctors Without Borders in Democratic Republic of Congo. We have Faridah Luanda with us, Refugee and Advocate and Gender and Diversity Coordinator at the Global Refugee Youth Network. And we have with us Sandrine Lusamba, who is the National Coordinator of SOFEPADI, Solidarité féminine pour la paix et le développement intégral. We're going to discuss for the following 90 minutes, an hour and a half, about the humanitarian crisis in the east of the DRC. We're going to be looking at the main humanitarian and protection concerns. We're going to be thinking through what synergies could still be taking place in between humanitarians, but not only, also in between state actors and humanitarians or other important stakeholders. And last but not least, we're going to be looking at the withdrawal of the MONUSCO and the gaps that has resulted into, especially in the South Kivu, and what could be better done for the next potential withdrawal in the North Kivu and in Ituri. So without further ado, I will start asking you, Sandrine, your organization, SOFEPADI, has been at the forefront of supporting survivors of sexual violence in the east of Congo. But at the same time, you've been advocating for peace. So your president said recently, the women are the first victims of war, but they hold the key to peace. So could you explain a little bit further, what does that mean?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Sandrine. I'm coming from the DRC. I'm the national coordinator of SOFEPADI. According to what our president, or the president of the board of members of SOFEPADI, Madame Luise, said, she was simply wanted to say that despite all the situation, the conflict situation, all the gender-based violence that women are facing in the DRC, they also have the power and that strength to work on peace. In our communities, women are up. They are working on peace as mediators, as those who can talk to youth who are in local youth who are local militias or who are members of groups, armed groups, that the peace is what we have and how they can work more for peace than for violence. And women in the DRC are resilient. Despite all the situation, they stand up, they work on peace, they sensitize communities, they sensitize men, they sensitize other women, that all of us, we can still work hand to hand to promote peace and to reduce violence in all cases. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that, Sandrine. Commissioner, you've been recently visiting the Eastern Congo. Apologies. Could you perhaps explain to the audience what was the purpose of that visit and what were the outcomes of the visit and where were the outcomes that did not happen of the visit?
Hopefully not in 2 minutes. I try. Hello to the audience also. I'm very happy that this is the opening panel because this is part of my answer. We consider DRC and especially the eastern part as a forgotten crisis that needs desperately more media attention in Europe, but also worldwide. So part of my, or the purpose of my trip was also to raise awareness within the government, of course, but also in the German and European discourse. I traveled 1 week after the new election was forming itself, so of course I also tried to find at a very early stage an access to the new government, since we have a lot of things that we need to discuss. MONUSCO, I think we will come to that later, was part of it. The plans to withdraw MONUSCO, what I consider as a mistake. Of course this, and also to find out how this new government want to address the security situation, especially in Eastern DRC. So debating this and also our plans to support with humanitarian assistance and in the field of stabilization and development policy, it is also necessary to talk to the governments. And after that, I traveled to the eastern part, to North and South Kivu, to get a better impression on the security situation. Of course, I found what you described in nearly every female person I talked to, every child. It is like really an epidemic when it comes to gender-based violence, and this is something I've never experienced like this before. So the urgency and the urgency of solving the conflict and try to better the security situation for the people there and all the displaced people, which are numbers that are also unimaginable, to get a better impression and also check if our funding and our priorities are right, was also part of the trip. So I leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Luise. Indeed, gender violence is, I would say, the top priority in terms of protection of civilians, but we also have, as you very rightly mentioned, the crisis of the displaced population. If I'm not wrong, there's over 3 million people displaced only in the North Kivu province, and a little bit more than 1 million only in Goma, which creates immense problems of protection of civilians. And Faridah, this being the case, and with your experience and your expertise on the people on the move topic, could you perhaps explain a little bit further what does it mean to be a displaced person, and how does it look like the situation day to day for a person who is in that dramatic situation?
Thank you so much. My name is Faridah. Originally, I'm from Democratic Republic of Congo. Currently, I'm based in Sweden, but I spent 6 years in a refugee camp in Uganda. A mother, and also activist, but also I'm a SGBV survivor. I'm sorry, when I talk about the situation, it hits me deeply. That's why you see my words are breaking. I'm also a victim to forced child marriage. When I think about the situation in Democratic Republic of Congo, my heart bleeds, because this is a personal story. To think about 6.9 million internally displaced people, and these people, my people, they are even cut off from their basic necessities, but also this is the biggest or the highest number on the African continent. The living conditions are there, just with many residing in makeshift shelters, lacking adequate food, clean water, health care, and also this left them vulnerable to illness, infectious diseases like COVID-19, HIV/AIDS, Mpox, cholera, Ebola. So everything hits us differently. And within this, the rampart of sexual-based violence against women and girls is horrifying. And this is alarmingly high numbers. For me, it's not just news. It's my life story. This same conflict tore apart my family, take away my mother at the age of 8. I was watching the pictures which was being shown her here, and that was Faridah, almost years back, when malnutrition, homeless, without education, without food, and everything was upside down. At the age of 13, I was forced into child marriage. The struggle. At the age of 15, I was a mother. And again, within the most challenging and vulnerable life. By the age of 14, again, the conflict hits me. I become a widow. When again, the husband who forced me to marry was killed, the conflict. And I fled to Uganda. So this conflict hits me a lot. Oh my God. It had given, after I gave birth, it's leaving me with a lot of scars, both physically and emotionally. Up to now, the nightmares. I've witnessed the first-hand, the harsh realities that women and girls and children face in this conflict. The long-term consequences are devastating. Gender inequality, trauma, and lack of safe spaces are pervasive, making recovery almost unattainable. You must not ignore the cries from Democratic Republic of Congo. Oh my God. This reminds me a lot. That's why, please, I'm so sorry, but it takes me back. The scars are never healed. Don't ignore these cries. We need to address the unique needs of women and girls, provide safe spaces, including urgently improving the living condition in the refugee camps, provide mental health care. The trauma inflicted by decades of conflict. Our resilience is strong, but our needs are urgent. We cannot be satisfied each time with killing others. We must not always resort to weapons to kill civilians. And these are other ways. There is other ways to claim rights. We just want peace. Women and girls in Congo, we just want peace. We are tired. And that everyone lays down their arms. Global communities, donors should pay attention to all situations at the same level and with the same degree of agency. There is no single conflict is worse than another. I thank you.
Faridah, thanks a lot for being so brave and honest with all of the audience. Of course, you don't have to excuse yourself, or it's all the opposite. I think we're all here with you, trying to fight for that, for the same cause. I think that was extremely courageous what you just did. So thanks a lot. So Manu, MSF has been operating in Congo for decades now. It's usually one of the largest missions of MSF. I think we've been naming the main protection and humanitarian concerns somehow already in the presentation of the colleagues. But perhaps could you give us the MSF perspective? You may have some numbers. You may be also willing to talk about the new MSF report on gender violence that was published a couple of weeks ago. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you, Manu.
Yeah, thanks, Omar. And we'll try to build a bit upon what was already said. And of course, trying to put through the data what Faridah has, through her personal testimony, done already, put forward, as we have been discussing in the keynotes, on principles, governance, etc. But beyond and above all of that, human dignity. We are talking about human people. We are talking about survivors of violence, survivors of sexual violence and other. Let me maybe start by, as you have been doing already, Omar, it's good to remind and recall, as we are talking about what we can call neglected, forgotten crisis, maybe voluntary, put aside in the competition of crises and also media attention for fundraising goals and other. More than 30 years linked to conflict, but not only. And not only focusing on the east of DRC, there are other hotspots, unfortunately. You mentioned it today, Faridah mentioned it also. We are talking about 6.9 internal displaced people. It's unimaginable, the denominator. But what is more unimaginable, when you set foot in Goma, when you set foot in other places to the northeast, but also to the center of the country, is the disproportionality of unmet needs. And we can discuss about prioritization. I think there is also part of it in terms of efficiency, quality, efficacy of what we are trying to do. There needs to be prioritization, and certainly to get back to what are the most urgent, unmet needs in order to give back to people in these harsh conditions the most basic, essential requirements, and in the end, human dignity. As simple as that. Part of being the same terre, le monde, la planète, the world, and not to be excluded. Think in terms of priorities, if we refer back to what sometimes people call the 10 priorities, there are INGO representatives, people who are a lot of thinking, reflecting on humanitarian aid delivery. Well, it comes back to these basic needs in order not to be exposed to violence. You mentioned it, Faridah, it's about minimum water and sanitation conditions in IDP camps. It's about food security in order not to be exposed, if not to potential violence, sexual violence. And maybe to end, Omar, as you mentioned it, yes, and there has been this incredible testimony from Faridah, but MSF has needed to bring out a report about the degree of sexual violence. And we called it, Faridah, what people told us. Nous appelons à l'aide. We rufen Hilfe. It's not MSF who are saying this, or are saying this. It's the survivors. Let's stop calling them victims. It's the survivors who try to rebuild their life. In the first semester of this year, here only talking North Kivu, our field collaborators have treated more than 17,000 survivors. It's linked to the conflict, not exclusively. And this is a tendency that unfortunately builds upon the total number of survivors. MSF teams have treated in 2024, 5 provinces, almost 26 survivors. And again, these are data, 6.9, 26, but it's about human lives, human dignity, and the capital, the human capital Sandrine was evoking. Mothers, children, men, the future. We all know the demographic pyramid in Africa, in the DRC. So in the end, and to close this first intervention, there is a link with the protection of these civilians, which is a duty. And all of us, we contribute to that. So in this whole environment, there are political actors, there is civil society, there is the UN mission now present for how long, there is a transition agenda, but there needs to be the minimum assured in order that these civilians displaced have the minimum protection in order not to be exposed to this enormous degree of violence. Our field collaborators, but most of all, local population, women, children, young men, are exposed to. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Manu. So I feel we've been highlighting the top of the iceberg in terms of visibility of what the problem really is. We're giving the reality of what's happening today in terms of the amounts of people suffering, the terrible and the dramatic consequences of this conflict. But I feel that often we don't really talk about the roots of the problem. So, Sandrine, I know you've been doing a lot of engagement in, but also outside of the DRC with some of the strongest countries in terms of fundraising and capacity to influence what happens in Congo. Would you say we don't talk enough about the roots of the conflict? What would you tell to the conventional donors and the strongest ones, like Germany, for example, since we are here? What would you tell them there needs to be done further? What are your recommendations in order to bridge the gap in between, the data that we see today and the real roots of the problem that would, if targeted, if addressed, would perhaps contribute to a peace building?
Thank you very much. Maybe before I come to that, I will just want to add something from what colleagues have said. Working on the field is not easy. Even as actors who works on the field, we every day need support, psychological support, because behind all the cases, behind all those numbers, those are human beings. We are human beings. In this situation, every one of us as actors, as humanitarian actors, we have a role to play. The role we have to play is really to work on programs who are taking that holistic support to the people who are affected. Because what we have understood is that we cannot come up with a program which touches only medical care. We have to touch all, like medical, psychological, judicial, how to say in English, care, and also socio-economic reintegration. Because when someone is affected, you can really treat the body, the physical, but we don't know how is his mind, how is his psychological state. After then, all those people have left their villages, they have left all like the farming activities they were doing, so they need to be reintegrated within the community. Because in our economy, you can say that DRC economy is more informal, where women have a big role to play to support families. Now imagine that woman who has been raped and going through all that, and when she's not able to take care of the family, children cannot go to school, the family cannot survive. So we need, as actors, to think at the holistic approach and more, let me say, localized approach, because it's really important. We have seen by experience when every crisis arrives, first, before all the humanitarian program, the international program starts, the community have to intervene. We have seen it with many crises, with the Nirangongo volcano, with all these armed conflicts. Organization or local actors in the communities have to start supporting, but without any support, without any logistic or financial support, they can't do nothing. The role of local organization is also, they have access to everywhere. We have, because I'm also a local actor, we have that acceptance within the community, and we know how or at what time to intervene before all the big and international programs arrive. So there is that need to support local actors. The government, the Congolese government, have also a big role to play, because it's because of the government failed to protect communities against those armed groups, against M23 or others. That's why we are in this situation. So the government have to really take in hand his responsibility to work more on peace process. We have the Luanda process, we have the Nairobi process. The government have really to play on that. We also facing a situation of having a national army, like FRDC, and having other groups which are supported by the government, what we call Wazalendo. It's a very big problem, because right now in the community, us, we don't know how to differentiate who is the true, the good Wazalendo and who is not. And those people, they are staying in the displaced camp as all displaced people. At night, they come back in the camp with their guns. And we have more guns within the camp, outside the camp, circulation of the guns, and what is not protecting us as a community. Those people at night, they're in the camp as displaced people. During the day, they are Wazalendos. So it's really difficult for us to understand who is doing what. So that is the role the governments have to play. The international government, like the Dutch country government, and talking to the Dutch government is also talking to the European Union. They have a big role to play as at international level. We cannot say today that either the Dutch government or the European Union, they don't know what's going on. They don't know who is doing what. They don't know who is supporting ADF, who is supporting M23. We all know, and they know which countries are behind which armed group and who is doing what. So it's time to really, if it is the sanction, to sanction. If it is taking decision, to take decision, because behind all that, human being, women, children, even men. Like 4 years ago, we couldn't talk about men who are victims of sexual violence. But today we have cases of men, of boys who are victims of sexual violence. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
No, thanks for that comprehensive answer, Sandrine. Commissioner, I guess you probably heard that message before as well, and you've heard it now, but the reality is that today we are in a difficult situation when it comes to availability of funds. Germany is facing serious challenges, but not only Germany, also other traditional donors, but If I bring the discussion a little bit back to the gender concerns, the Equality Institute, which highlights global investment on GBV prevention, revealed that GBV is usually the least funded sector in comparison to others. So, considering that, unfortunately, Germany is witnessing a cut of almost half of its humanitarian funds, can you perhaps explain us a little bit how do you navigate, how do you manage to keep some of the geographic context and some of the thematic issues at the priority? How do you prioritize when funds are decreasing dramatically at that level?
Well, that's the toughest question one can get. I mean, we are not in the end of the negotiation of the cuts, and I make no secret out of it that I think it's very dangerous, the course we are taking here. Cutting the funds for humanitarian assistance simply means that we cannot address as many people as we did before. So this is the reality, and we also have to face that, and not only the humanitarians in the Foreign Office or the Foreign Office itself, but the whole government. Because what we are doing is a commitment of the government, and this is being questioned by these cuts, and that's a political question. So, but in numbers, it simply means that we cannot help as many people as we did before, could help before, or support, or NGOs we supported. So the good news is that, of course, the very strong focus we already have on the fight against gender-based violence will remain, but with less money, of course. It's a question about proportionality, but in the end it means we will not fund even more projects in the regions where we are active and engaged. So this is the reality, and I think there's no way around it. Even though, of course, we try to make our humanitarian assistance more efficient, more localize it more, have more synergies, nexus between development and humanitarian assistance. But still, in the end, less money means less help. And this is why we need to challenge this development politically. And I have a lot of hope and put a lot of trust into the parliament, which also has a say in it. So we try to, navigate and fix things, and even though we have cuttings in the budget for humanitarian assistance, we still have the promise of our finance minister that in terms of, or if it comes to new crises that were not foreseen, we can get additional money. So it's very technical, but in the end, this is what is happening. But the focus on the fight against gender-based violence will remain, will be still our priority. Germany is one of the countries that always has focused on it and has a lot of projects and focus points in the countries that are addressing this issue. And I think this will remain, but still we also need the political pressure from everyone. We are also, I mean, this is also no secret that the Foreign Office is not happy about this developments, and I'm also not happy about it. But we will see if the Parliament can help us a little bit here, and that we are able to further address, especially in the crisis that you rightfully named neglected. It's maybe more appropriate to use that term. Neglected crises have even more support in times like these when we are talking about cutting of fundings. Yeah.
Thanks, Commissioner. I guess all of us, humanitarians, the civil society, we want to remain. We will be realistic, although with wishful thinking and optimist, an optimist look to the future, and so we will try to continue advocating for parliamentarians and other governments to listen to the real needs and humanize, as the colleagues were saying, what's really happening in some of these conflict environments. But that's not the only crisis or political concern that we have as humanitarians today in Europe. There is, you spoke about the parliamentarians in Berlin, I suppose, but we look at the parliament in Brussels. What happened a few weeks ago is also very concerning for all of us. The nature, the color of the European Parliament has drastically and very concerningly changed, and perhaps that's not is gonna be for a lasting period. So, Faridah, you today are a refugee in Sweden. Sweden has also seen political changes recently. What would you say to those governments that are changing their approach towards migration, and to the European Union generally, who's been for the last years having an approach that is not the one that humanitarians are advocating for when it comes to the management of the migration phenomenon? Is the, you know, how could you help building up that narrative so that they understand that there's that need and that, you know, borders need to be open for migrants?
Yeah, thank you so much. As a young woman who have been recently settled, I have lived through these realities, and that many policies discussed in abstract terms. So for me, the journey of a refugee is in flout with immense challenges and profound necessities, and it is crucial that the voices of those who are directly affected are not. It's crucial that the voices of those who are directly affected are not just heard, but also heeded. And there is a famous poem from Wazan, which says that no one leaves a home unless home is a mouth of a shark. So politicians need to consider the human stories behind immigration. And each policy and debate about borders and numbers directly impacts thousands of lives, like lives like mine. And this increasing politicization of migration not only affected our chances of finding safety and rebuilding our lives, but also how we perceived and treated in these new communities matters. Migration is not just a political issue, it is a human one. So policies should be crafted with compassion and also respect for human dignity. It is essential to involve refugees themselves in the policy-making process, and to ensure that the solutions are practical and human. We bring perspectives and also solutions that can not only be understood by those who lived through these experiences. So furthermore, I urge you to resist narratives that dehumanize or stereotype migrants, and stop normalizing violence through pushbacks and arbitrary detentions. Say, we have dreams. And many of us, we are driven by the desire to contribute to these new communities positively. And the European Union leaders must reverse, I think, courses and end the policies of shutting those out of seeking safety, and governments must honor their obligations under international law to ensure protection. But also in my conclusion, I ask that you emphasize policies that protect and empower all individuals, and also regardless of their origin, like all of us, let's us work together to create environment where every voice is valid and valued, and every person has the opportunity to thrive. And this is it's not just beneficial for refugees or migrants, but also the entire community or countries. So we seek more than existence, we seek life, and we plead for more than sympathy, but we seek action to be taken. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Faridah, again for that very well-informed answer. So let me go back to the DRC. We've spoken about the role of the UN. We've briefly mentioned the withdrawal of the MONUSCO. Very quickly, all of us, or at least you, have positioned yourself vis-a-vis that withdrawal that has started in the South Kivu. So I'm going to be asking both of you, Sandrine and Manu, whoever wants to start first. Perhaps, Sandrine, from a national NGO perspective, usually you have to jump in and to cover some of the gaps that the UN system, be it MONUSCO, be it some of the other UN agencies, are unable to address. What are usually those gaps that you've seen your organization or others around the national NGO platforms have to cover up? And what has changed in terms of those gaps with the withdrawal in the South Kivu that needs to be given visibility so that we can avoid or minimize similar concerns when the MONUSCO will eventually withdraw from North Kivu and from Ituri?
So thank you very much. MONUSCO is in the DRC for 25 years, and it's the biggest UN mission in the country. And community builds very deep and trust in the MONUSCO since they're in the community. But after 25 years, and the conflict situation, the security situation is going worse and worse and worse, we can understand the bias from the community to, start saying about MONUSCO have to leave, MONUSCO have to go. But there's also in the other end, promises of politicians during the election, because they wanted to show the population that we understand you, we have listened to you about what you are asking, about MONUSCO have to go. But then there was no deep thought about what MONUSCO was doing, what MONUSCO was covering within the country, and who is going to do what after MONUSCO has gone. I can give you an example. MONUSCO was among what MONUSCO is doing, working on human rights violation monitoring. Right now in South Kivu, we don't know who is doing that job. Yet it was very important because activists, their rights are violated, members of the communities, humanitarian actors, but right now it's like there's that gap of the monitoring what MONUSCO was doing. MONUSCO was also playing a big role on civilian protection. In South Kivu, I can tell you, like, there's areas where population or community members still run because the MONUSCO was around. But now they are going to that place, and the MONUSCO campment, which was there, it's empty. So who is going to protect them? There is a very, very big gap on what MONUSCO was doing and who is going to do it now. We have seen the withdrawal plan. There is also a huge budget attached to that plan, yet it's not also clear on who is going to cover, like the government I don't know yesterday or before that if there is any communication from the government that they are going to take each percentage of the budget. But personally, us as a local actors, we don't have any information about what the government is going to do to cover what MONUSCO was doing. And all that, talking on local based organization perspective, we don't have to rush. We have to, understand, and we have to monitor the process in South Kivu to build more or to do it better in Ituri and North Kivu. In Ituri, we met with the government, the military governor, like 2 weeks ago, and we are talking about everything which is going around from local armed group. And we understood that not even the government has the capacity to do, comment on dit enquête en anglais? To do surveys on those armed groups, on who is doing what. That is the work that only MONUSCO have the logistic, has the funds, and only MONUSCO can do that. And the reports coming from MONUSCO, for us, we trust, than other organizations doing the reports. So there is that need of really thinking. We advocate a lot. We know, and it is okay that MONUSCO have to go, but we advocated that the timeline have to be reviewed or removed. Then we first understand what is going on in South Kivu. Then we know how to do it better and good in North and Ituri provinces. Thank you.
We hear you, and that's and it's actually certainly very interesting to see what happens when the a peacekeeping mission leaves a particular location. No? The amount of critics that usually they get because of not doing enough when they are in place, but then when they leave, we still recognize that they were playing, despite all, a certain role. So I guess it's a complex narrative to maintain. I mean, it's a narrative that has a certain complexity if we want to maintain coherence. But I'm an ex-MSFer, as you know, and I've been myself very strongly advocating against peacekeeping missions, shouting out, media outlets, press conferences, etc. So how do you manage this dilemma of when they are there, we criticize they're not doing enough, but when they leave, we actually recognize that there are some gaps that they leave behind. So as MSF today, what is your position when it comes to the MONUSCO? How, what are your advocacy points? Kinshasa, New York, Geneva?
Okay, thanks. And criticizing an UN or EU or whatever bashing is easy and cheap. And then it's to be assumed. First of all, just to put the frame very clear, the whole MONUSCO retreat and transition, let's be very clear, it's not only the retreat. There is another part, the flip of the coin, which is the transition part, the governmental responsibility to assure, notably what is one of the key pillars of the MONUSCO mandate, which is protection of the civilian population. So the retreat and transition done upon the demand of the DRC government, with a very clear imperative in terms of timeline. I've clearly heard in informal discussions that this first chapter, South Kivu, with its timeline and its retreat on the 30th of June of this year, is the sacrifice. Please listen, I heard this from accredited diplomatic people. It's a sacrifice to be made in order to see the timeline shift and re-clarify roles and responsibilities. This would mean not only neglect, but abandon South Kivu population, where there are IDPs, abandoned communities, and most of all, and here comes one of the advocacy points, we can criticize, we can bash, but in terms of access, I think Alberto, MSF colleague, mentioned it in the introductory call. As humanitarians, principled humanitarians. We want to fight for access to those communities in needs. Access, logistical, security-wise, there has been a role for MONUSCO. So, if there is a retreat, then the transition part, there needs to be a duty, an obligation to all parties, but of course to the governmental party, to assure and facilitate access logistically, security-wise, etc. Second point is, of course, linked to, you mentioned it, Sandrine, protection of civilians, but also a neutral, impartial, notifying documentation of, unfortunately, violations of human rights. And I think there's a clear call, Luise, the Joint Office for Human Rights, it's understaffed, under-equipped, and that means that any documentation is now exclusively and heavily relying on those who have stayed and continue to deliver, which is local organizations and the few others that have remained, on which we call, please do stay and continue to deliver and advocate. So maybe a couple of key reflections and points, and happy to further elaborate following this session. Thank you.
Okay, yes, so there will be, hopefully we will have 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A afterwards. So thanks Manu. There seems to be a lot of advocacy to continue doing, but not only here, and what I hear is that you say mostly perhaps in Kinshasa. And I'm wondering, having two representatives of the local NGO sector in the DRC, the international refugee networks, Faridah, do you think there would be any space for organizations that are composed and led by displaced population or refugees, diaspora, to advocate for the government of the DRC or other key governmental structures to look into the way they are conducting their protection of civilians, the way they are putting that as a priority in their respective agendas, transversally? Do you feel there's a space? Is there any avenue, some light on it? And I'll let you as well, Sandrine, perhaps address this. It would be very interesting to look at both your perspectives. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Omar. For me, I can respond to that question. Supporting refugee-led organization or local organization, this is crucial opportunity because these organizations are 24/7 in the community. We know very well that some of the NGOs, they have a limited time when they are working in the local communities. And that I can testify as these groups are the first hand. For me today to sit here to speak to this audience, to read, because sometimes I want to come with my notes and read. This is one of the testimony that the local communities, I raised through my points, that at the age of 13, I was forced into child marriage. At the age of 8, I was in the critical condition. I didn't attend school. I didn't have a proper education where I can learn English, where I can write, where I can read. But when these local organizations respond to my challenge, and I have a solution to also advocate for more fellow refugees, especially women and girls in the local communities. Why I'm saying this, that this organization, they are doing a great work in kind of like a little, they are facing in kind of a dilemma of accessing resources, but they keep on going. And this is the people or the local organizations supporting us, helping us to save us in times of crisis. For me to reach at the border, to be saved and to be alive today with my son, it was the local community who helped me to take me up to the border. From Goma, Saki, it's very far to the border of Uganda. but they came up trying to help people to run to be saved, and towards the local organizations. In Uganda, when I attended the adult literacy, it was open doors for my opportunity as a young woman, still a refugee, but also a child mother, changed my vulnerability into strength because I started communicating directly, and also I formed my own organization, which is responding to almost a year, 200 vulnerable women and girls through vocational training skills and also psychosocial support in the community in the absence of the NGO. For example, in COVID-19, let's bring that example, whereby that many countries and NGOs, they were having restrictions. Me, myself, I was still in Uganda, in Chakatu refugee settlement. We stood up, we made masks, we translate information because our community, they don't understand English. Others, they didn't even go to school, they don't know French. They speak only Swahili, and I speak Swahili. I know, okay, if they say we have to wear masks, we don't have to shake hands, I can translate it in Swahili, and they can be saved until the humanitarian actors or the government could remove the restrictions, and then they come back to work. So we are responding directly. So what I can say, GRYN, we have created a model. This is the Global Refugee Youth Network. Why we come up with the Global Refugee Youth Network? To see that the local organization, these local groups who don't have access to resources, who don't have even a platform to the global community, like me, as I'm seated here today, those who are not even on social media, but they are there doing a great work, we reach them directly because we know them, we know what to do, we know how to respond to the challenges. Challenges happens, and we come up with the solutions. We supported them with just small funding and even giving them trainings on leadership, especially women and girls, to NGBV and forced child marriage, because that is one of the passion I have, girls to attend school without any challenges like what I went through. And then that 1,000 to 5,000 US dollar, we supported almost 111 groups around the world. And these groups, we don't care if they are registered or not, but the impact, it's amazing. They have did a great work. They are reporting, and we report to the donors because they are doing a great work and they know the challenges and they know the solutions. Why can't we help them? Why can't the global communities, the EU, the European Union, the donors in this law, connect with the networks from the conflict areas, like us who are displaced? We know what we want, we know how to end GBV and SGBV against women and girls. We know what to say. It's a matter of giving us platforms and trust us with a little, and we can report back, we can bring a very big impact. So I think that's answered the question very well. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Sandrine, you being on the ground, I think it would be very interesting to hear from you. Are there spaces to advocate for the government to think through and potentially modify or remain a little bit more flexible on the presence of the MONUSCO in Ituri and North Kivu? Elections have passed. Perhaps it's a few years until there's again the need of maintaining that electoral narrative. Is there a window of opportunity? Do you feel there are elements of the government who are willing to think twice and consider what is the gap that the MONUSCO is leaving?
I can say yes, not like a yes from myself, but from the experience, from the ground. Because we cannot say what is not there. We just have to show the government that we decided that MONUSCO withdraw in South Kivu. And in this area, this is the reality. In this area, this is the situation now. Putting the government devant le fait accompli, comme on dit en français.
The facts.
Because it's really to tell stories, because the situation is there. And the government have to see that, yes, the MONUSCO have to go, but what is the price to pay and what is the role and who is doing what, and to take a full responsibility. Because MONUSCO, agencies, NGOs, we are all coming to support, not to do what the government is supposed to do. I think if we monitor well what is going on the ground, we will have like proof, or we will have examples to advocate and to show the government that we need a MONUSCO to go, but this is the reality right now, and this is what can be done in manner that the withdrawal for the 2 other provinces be, more human, more prepared, and well-founded, because that is the need. Yeah.
Okay. Perhaps the advocacy needs to go as well towards the direction of pushing them to enhance their capacity on protection of civilians once they have inherited that responsibility from the MONUSCO itself, going in line with what Manu said. So we've spoken about human rights. We are talking to a humanitarian audience. There's tiny differences, but still they exist, those differences, normative differences in between human rights and international humanitarian law. Yet, we see a very particular role that you play, Commissioner, at the German government. You're looking at both topics. Could you perhaps explain a little bit further how do you look at it from a synergy perspective, or what are the added value? What is the added value of looking at it as a whole, human rights and IHL, and what are the challenges that you face when you're representing both?
Well,
perhaps with if you can put a little bit of a DRC touch. That
yeah, I will try. Well, I mean, if you talk about the need of humanitarian assistance, we find a situation where people are in a protection crisis, right? So they are in a situation where they need support to at least have the grounds for a dignified life. But what is the case is that it is always connected to human rights in the end. Because where you have a crisis of a humanitarian crisis, human rights violations will follow. That is our observation in nearly every context. So, and it is also in the DRC, and I can of course give some examples, but coming back to MONUSCO, it is, I think what you described was also my feeling, that it is like a test balloon what is happening in South Kivu, with no intention, maybe not intention, but no real proof that this government is able to step in and close the gap MONUSCO will leave. So it is even more important that the international community, donors, NGOs, and of course the local communities look very closely and observe the situation. I'm with you to really see what is happening and put even more attention to South Kivu, because it is very dangerous what is happening there. So of course we try to address that politically, but you know, it is a situation, and my observation is, and of course I can also be proven wrong, hopefully, that it will not be possible to close the gap. So it is about security in a very dire humanitarian situation. And this is a question of human rights in the end, so it's interconnected. And when I see MONUSCO's work, of course, it's been 25 years, and there could be maybe a better mandate, better work, better evaluation. I don't know, but in the end, I have seen that MONUSCO, for example, is trying to help children that have been abducted, enslaved, being forced into the most horrific situations, and MONUSCO is trying to negotiate them out of it, working with NGOs that are sheltering these survivors and helping them to get psychosocial support and find back into the communities. And this is, I think, very valuable work. You know, it is not something that we can just leave aside. This is what the government is challenging or facing. This is the gap they have to close. And I don't see that right now, so this is why I can really strongly stand on my point of view to see MONUSCO withdrawal in this very moment as a really big mistake. And I just want to share one thing, because we have talked about M23 and all the militia and groups that are actually also violating human rights every day. And just to understand a little bit the debate in Germany and why I think it is a neglected, forgotten crisis, and that we are not like debating about the people in DRC rightfully here in this context, is, for example, the debate we had on the so-called Rwanda model and the question on migration. So, you know, we have a debate in Germany where we actually talk about deepening our diplomacy and cooperation with Rwanda in the field of migration, and never in one sentence it has been mentioned that Rwanda also plays a role in Eastern Congo. Yeah, I try to break the silence by also pointing this out. It is something that has to do with also European and German policies to focus on what is going on here, to reduce debates and global contexts on migration and internal affairs. And this is a very big mistake, because of course we normalize Rwanda's role in Eastern DRC and their involvement, and however you describe it. It is, you know, it is very, very brutal, but we need to change that. We need to put that in a bigger context, and we need to address this and not normalize countries that are like having a real bad impact on other countries. So it is challenging on a diplomatic level, of course, but we need to address that. And this is, of course, why I'm also pointing this out here. It has also been addressed, of course, diplomatically, but in order to change something, we have to ask ourselves if we are like debating it rightfully here, or in a you know correct way. And I think we have to improve.
Well, thanks for that very honest, those honest words as well, Commissioner. In your role, I guess you also need to be diplomatic in many audiences. So it's also good that you know, at times you can be blunt and call a cat a cat. I think we're going to keep it here for the questions that I'm asking you, and I'm going to let the audience ask you a few questions as well. We have, if I'm not wrong, 15 or 10? 10? Okay. Okay, very good. So 10 to 12, so that probably gives us max 5 questions. So please, if anybody has questions, raise up your hands, and my colleagues will give you a mic. So we have a question here in the first row.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for your insight in the DRC. I would like to address, my name is Andreas Wolf, I'm working with Medico International, and I'm a bit new to the humanitarian debate, so that's why I'm learning a lot here. One question, a little bit, because we started the section with no peace, no protection. What I'm wondering is that we spoke a lot about the German role and European role, and neighboring countries now just popping up. But where in the picture is the African Union? And to make it a real, I understood this is really an African world war and an African war. And it seems that the absence of political initiative to really end these 30 years of conflict region must come from the region, rather than delegating it to the UN, delegating it to the European or the US or whoever powers to be. And I think this is something that I think a humanitarian demand for a political solution. This can be the only way forward in a humanitarian situation that is so dire, as you explained so clearly, is that this cannot continue with MINURSO, with the UN mission or without it. Thank you.
Thanks. We can take perhaps 2 more questions.
Thank you so much. My name is Maria. I work for Caritas Germany. And first of all, of course, thank you so much, Sandrine and Faridah, for coming here, for talking to us, talking maybe with us, giving us this direct insight into the situation. Thank you so much. This is really, we cannot be reminded often enough of what it is on the ground that is happening. And that refers me to my question, which goes to Luise. I'm sorry to bother you on the last point that you mentioned yourself already, the role of Rwanda in the conflict. And I would like to hear from you, not your personal opinion, but really if you could maybe explain us, because you are here as representative of the GFFO, if you could explain explain to us the official position of the German Foreign Office towards Rwanda and the repeated claim to cease military cooperation with Rwanda because of their meddling with M23. Thank you.
There's no third question, so I guess, oh yes, there's a hand raised back there, and
Mustafa Abdullah, Robert Koch Institute. Thank you so much for your interventions, and thanks for Faridah for sharing her experience. I have never come close to the conflict in the DRC like now, and this is very, you're brave to share this experience. Thank you so much. I would like to talk about this forgotten conflict, but also about the visible conflicts that are going on right now, which we are trying to be silent about. And I'm not going to talk about them. I just want to say we have to break the silence about such conflicts, but also this kind of the conflicts that are going on now that we are, observing and seeing every day, but being silent about them. I would like to talk about the DRC and say that we see that there is gender-based violence. We have victims, lots of victims. But I would like to insert also the victimizers and say that they are also victims to all kinds of conditions, underlying conditions that they have been going through and that leads them to act this way. We have to think about our role here and the arms that they're using in order to kill people and threaten people and so on and so forth. So we should think about the industry of weapon industry that's going around the world and so on. This is the moment that we have to think about these things. So I'm offering something which is or an idea that I think we have to think about the very deep underlying conditions in order to find solutions for this. I know that the EU and other countries are not providing support, providing help, but I think if we solve the problems, then we don't need help. I'm not saying that we should not provide help, but we should find solutions, grassroots level solutions to the problems. I'm not also trying to underestimate the support and the humanitarian work that's being done, but I think there is a lot of cosmetic work that's being done, and we need to get to a more sustainable solutions to these problems in order to find the right answer to the problems for Faridah and other Faridahs who are being victimized right now as we are speaking. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that intervention and comment. So, Luise, I'm inclined to give you the floor because I have the impression that both first questions were more perhaps oriented to you, and then we can give the floor to the colleagues if they want to complete.
So I try to narrow down your question, which basically is the question of the role of the African Union, and I'm not sure if I can answer it all by myself, and I would appreciate the help of colleagues and the expectations especially. So what we're trying to do is, of course, to work with the African Union in any way, so especially with the African Women's Network, which is also having ideas on how to make the humanitarian system more sensitive. As you pointed out, gender-based violence is not addressed by every country with a priority. So we try to work together, put it also in a place where it becomes more, how to say, usable for the work on the ground, and localization is one key issue of it. But of course, I mean, we're also debating the question on how we can put the humanitarian system more in the responsibility of the countries we address. Because in the end, and this was pointed out very clearly, you know best what is good for your communities, where to start, how to address, who is the actor that has the trust to really improve the situation. So this is something we debate in the context of a different humanitarian system that is led by the communities. So really shifting it with the responsibilities, shifting it to the local communities. But it is complicated because you need some, let's say, infrastructure. And you need the willingness of the donors in the countries that we are also able to, you know, hand over the responsibility, even though we fund, for example. And this is something German bureaucracy, I think, is not very good in. So, and also, yeah, okay, that is, yeah, it is a question we have to work on, definitely. So I would just want to say that also localization brings local NGOs into the situation to have contact with German bureaucracy, and this also takes a lot of resources. Let's put it like this. So if we want this, if we really want to shift responsibilities, we also need to work on the bureaucratic system behind it. But I'm willing to do that, and I hope then with this we can, in a way, change the situation on the ground. So I was aware, or I was pretty sure that someone will raise the question, and I will answer in the same way I did before. We know about the regional outcome, Auswirkung? Impact, maybe, Rwanda has. We addressed that critically in our conversation, and of course we know that this is also interconnected with, and this is why I mentioned the migration debate here in Germany, with it has an impact also if we normalize the situation. So even though there is, I'm not aware of a positioning, I know that there is a debate about it, and also the knowledge that everything we do in normalizing will have an effect, an impact on DRC. And I think this is something that brought us a little bit a step forward. So the debate on migration was also helpful to point that out. And just to give you also the end of the story, the Rwanda model was debated in the government. It was put into a process of evaluation and with a lot of experts. And I have the feeling that no one is really following this idea in the government, but I will stay very focused and observe this very closely. And also the Rwanda model, which is practiced by Great Britain, is also not working very well. So, and it's very expensive. So we have a lot of good arguments beside the global situation, or the situation between Rwanda and DRC, arguments against this very inhumane way of working or providing for refugees here in Europe. So.
No, thanks for that. I wanted to jump in on the African Union question, because I think the role the regional institutions play in the continent is important and needs to be addressed. And actually in the DRC, there's been 2 missions, regional forces intervening. In the East, there was the East African Community, and then it changed for political reasons to the South African Development Community, which are still on the ground with a few thousands of combatants. But perhaps having you two, Faridah and Sandrine, African citizens, what is your opinion? Why do you think the African Union is, or do you think the African Union could and should be more present? And if they're not, what do you think is the reason?
the African Union, I'm really talking about what us as Congolese women, we have tried to do in terms of advocacy. It's really hard to understand the position of the African Union. We have seen the failure of the Armée de l'Afrique de l'Est, the East African the community, the force. We have seen the failure. How, okay, we know, as we are saying, which countries is playing which role. Then we found the same country sending his soldier in the same, what are we waiting? What do we need as a result to that? At the time that M23 is increasing in terms of fighting and violations, then you are sending again another troop which comes to play the role that MONUSCO of doing, that observing. Observing what? Now, according to the community and women's organization, we have seen clearly that the military solution is not what we want, because we have now many troops within the same, sharing the same area, like let's say Goma. We have this, we have FRDC, we have Wazalendo, then we have the East African community, then we have again Sami DRC, and we don't really seeing the collaboration between all these forces. And they're just putting community in danger, because we have seen when they start fighting, le bombe tombe dans les camps. So it's just community and population who are putting in danger. We really appeal to the African Union to play a clear role on pushing more in peace agenda in terms of Luanda, the Luanda process, because the military solution is not strong and is not bringing solution to the situation in the DRC.
I'm saying we have 3 minutes. I'm going to share a little bit about what I think. I'm not a politician, and I don't want to be involved in that because I hate it, all my life. But what I think, if we are here with the European Union or with the global community, I believe as Faridah that there is a kind of a pressure could come from this audience to the African Union or to the East African Union to cease fire and to put their arms down, and then they leave the country. And I believe that here, as the European Union, they're doing a great work to resource the African Union to run maybe the projects or to run the activities which is going on, but maybe they use it in a wrong way, again, not to take their responsibility to react as soon as possible. So for me, what I can say that the global community could pressure these countries. And another thing, what I can say to the African leaders or my leaders or those who are fighting without knowing what they are looking for. Because I don't believe that this war, which has spent 30 years and over, I was born, they are fighting, but we don't know that clear what they are looking for and what they want. Unless of hurting the civilian, hurting women and girls, we are very tired with wounds which are not healing up to now. So I think they have to come out from where they are, away from the bush, and they say what they need. To sit, to respect the, I heard that they always sign agreements. They need to respect those agreements and to give the power to the people to have a clear elections, a decent elections where we can elect whom can lead us and be on peace for all of these years. Because I think they lose the track. They don't know what they want. The conflict which killed all our grandfathers and grandmothers. For me, I left only with my son and my brother, young brother. I don't have anyone in Congo. I don't even remember where my house was. I don't remember even my village, and I don't know even any neighbor. because that is happening. But we are tired. They have to put their arms down and they sign the agreement, the peace agreement. And another thing which I want to raise, let's add women in all the agreements. I think also that is missing. Women, we want peace and we need peace. Always where there is women, like we have the High Commissioner here, she's a lady. She's very calm and she knows how to bring peace. And I think that is missing in Congo. All the leaders, the male, which is good, but I think female, they can discuss issues which can bring peace and also save us from gender-based violence. I think we need to look at the gender equality. Gender equality matters best. And women's participation, meaningful participation at all levels, I think will reach the way where we can get peace. For me, I just need peace. And I'm representing the voice of voiceless because I'm not a politician, I'm a civilian. And I want to live, my people to live, and other girls to live and to thrive. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Faridah, again for that powerful answer. I think we're going to stop it here. Thanks, everyone, for the interest in this opening session. We clearly, all of us understand and acknowledge that there's no peace, there's no protection, and there's massive humanitarian challenges. But if we can take out of this discussion a few potential avenues to move forward, I think we all agree that there needs to be further visibility of this situation, and then further advocacy with those visible elements in many layers of the decision makers and policy makers spheres, be it in Goma, be it in Kinshasa, be it in New York, be it in Geneva, be it in Berlin. There seems to be an agreement of the fact that the MONUSCO plays a role and they should not be withdrawing immediately. We've also been very rightly highlighting the importance of centering the decision making and the thinking through on the displaced population, on women. These are the ones who should be perhaps on the front of those advocacy activities and initiatives. Well, despite the very concerning situation in terms of fundraising, one can think that perhaps localization is just the compulsory way forward, and that could match the smaller availability of resources. So I'm sure I've forgotten a few valid points, but I believe those are the ones that represent the most all of your voices. Thanks, Manu. Special thanks to you, Faridah, for that very courageous and very powerful message and testimony. Commissioner, thanks a lot for representing the authorities here today, and Sandrine, many thanks as well for bringing local voices to Berlin. Thanks, everyone. And next time.